Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in downtown Quincy. You know, when you think of Quincy architecture, you're inclined to think of the grand old homes that were built in Quincy. But some of the grand old churches are highlighted by Quincy Preserves in their annual altar crawl. And they've arranged to let us see 3 of those churches that are going to be showcased in this year's altar crawl. We start at St. Boniface, which was built in the 1960s here in Quincy. And Monsignor Quincy, this church, when it was built in the 1960s, was probably quite a sensation, wasn't it?
It was a huge sensation. I mean, right in the heart of downtown, to have this structure, and especially since the original one burned to the ground, so people were able to see the demolition and the construction.
Right. So St. Boniface was here, it burned down.
Yeah.
Then the architect, John Benya, who is from Quincy,
right,
was commissioned to design this church, and there's nothing else like it, is there?
Nowhere. You go out to Mendon, Illinois, and you'll see a small caricature of the same church, all down to size.
Tell us about the day they put this cross on the steeple.
Oh, it was a memorable day. You can imagine the crane to hoist that up there. I mean, there was no traffic down here at all. Everybody's eyes went up to heaven, and to see that go right into place. And they had obviously it was all planned. It just went down into there, and then they screwed it in, and nothing has swayed it since.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, listen, would you take us inside?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Thank you. Monsignor, it is a big space, isn't it?
It's a beautiful space. It looks like a square block, but
it does.
When you start to get into the history that's into these windows and walls, it's a beautiful edifice that has been designed by Benya.
It looks like it's blocks of marble, all just placed together, and it's gorgeous stone, just beautiful
All
stone.
the stone came from Indiana.
Is that right?
Inside and outside. And it's all self-cleaning. The outside never has to be touched. Every time it rains, it cleans the stone. And on the inside, you won't ever have to clean. It's just all...
Just dust.
Yeah.
You just have to dust.
Yeah.
John Benya, a lot of people from Quincy and around Quincy know that name because much of Quincy architecture
He's in his era, from like 55 to 70, he built a number of churches, schools, business places, and so this is one of his pride and joys. Yeah. He really...
We're going to mention this more than once during this interview that we have, but people will notice it behind us. There is a choir loft, and of course back then, during Catholic Mass, the choir stayed up there.
That's right.
Now they invite the congregation to sing more from somewhere up in this space, but back then, and of course there was an organ up there at one time too, or is it still there?
The organ is still there from Wick's Organ in Highland. And when we had our closing Mass here in 2006, naturally the church was packed, and the entire choir loft and the choir, it was just, it was a beautiful liturgy, a difficult liturgy, but a beautiful liturgy.
This was finished finally in 1962, I think.
Yes.
And back then, before what they called Vatican II, and Catholics all know that, there was a back altar, and the priest would say Mass with his back to the congregation, and that's what the back altar we're looking at is. Right. And then after that, back in the late 60s, then this forward altar came forward, and the priest faces the congregation now. But the back altar, look at that marvelous circle of gold and bronze there. What does that signify?
Well, it symbolizes the 6 sacraments, and then as they all center around and focus then on the Eucharist, which is on the main altar in the tabernacle. And then in the squares are the symbols, like you see the water, the keys of forgiveness, the Holy Spirit, and then the anointing of the sick, and the priesthood, and then marriage. And so it all kind of just brings everyone together. So if you're in church, you're seeing that over and over again.
The 6 sacraments of the Catholic Church. Another thing you wouldn't see in a church these days is a communion rail.
Right.
And this one is, as you can see, this doesn't look like most communion rails. It's marble and it's rounded like that, and it's beautiful. It's very unusual.
It's just the uniqueness. And you notice he carries the symbol of that cross. It's a German cross, and it's all around the altar. It's everywhere you look in this place. You'll see the same design. One interesting thing about when they did the altar, that's a portable altar, and so you just push a button in the back and it raises up, and then you can slide this across the sanctuary, like for weddings and things that you need, and then it just comes back when it's needed. So when they do weddings and stuff, they've done a lot of that.
This is an interesting concept over here. Most churches have a cry room, but in this case, Benya designed this so that these windows go up and down, and there's a mirror, so you can't see into the cry room. You see a mirror, but from the other side, where the family would be with the crying baby, they can see the Mass being celebrated.
And you have to remember, the priest was at the main altar there. So they did not miss a thing, and whoever was in there, they would push the button on the other side to let the priest know someone was in there, and the window would go up when it was time for communion. And so they all, you just get used to things when you're in a parish.
Sure. Now, we can't leave this church without looking at these windows over here, these stained glass windows. And you really have to be very perceptive. But you've explained to me that if we look at this first window, each one of these windows is one of the 10 Commandments. And you know how to read these. Now, I'm not good enough at that, but you tell me that if you squint your eyes, you can see, if you follow the white.
You follow the white and start at the top, and you'll see with different designs, but you can see the T all the way across. But I am the Lord thy God, and thou shalt not have strange gods before me. And then you get down to the bottom, and then you'll see the gold, and you'll see there's just one plaque. And that comes from the 10 Commandments were on the 2 tablets that were given in the Bible. And so then as you go across, those tablets increase, matching the number of the commandments. All the way around.
So you get an extra tablet on each one, so that's okay. The 3, 4, 5, and then on the other side of the church, you would pick it up.
Yeah, it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Each the 10 Commandments.
And so it's just phenomenal, but it takes you a while to know how to squint your eyes and see that, because most people walk in and say, oh, those are nice windows.
They're just abstract art, right?
Yeah, and then you see all beyond the white, then you see the symbols that are reflected in the blues. I mean, it's just a magnificent abstract.
When you look at a big space like this, you're impressed with it, and the reason you're impressed with this space is because there's no supports or pillars.
No, it's all steel. All steel. Perfect vision no matter where you sit. And then encased in the walls are 3 confessionals. And so that was put in as well. Everything was concealed. He didn't miss using a square inch of this place, you know.
Let me point this out. See this vent here? The heating vents are all in the pews, aren't they? Okay. And the air conditioning comes from other vents that are up there, and you don't see it.
All the lights. We had a problem when we were fixing this, because it was closed for a while, and we put all new bulbs in, and they all went out. And that's an expensive procedure. There's a lot of bulbs up there. It may not seem like it.
But interesting, you don't need a ladder to change those bulbs, because there's a way to get up there, and you can walk. There's certain walkways up there.
All the way across the entire
church. Ingenious.
So all you have to do, if there's a problem with the sound, they just go up there and they know exactly where to go, and it's amazing, just amazing.
One short story before we leave this church. These pews were in the original St. Boniface,
They were.
which burned down. That church was located on this very spot and
Same
rebuilt and designed by John Benya and rebuilt. These pews were in the original church, and you as a lad, remember, you moved these pews, didn't you?
The day of the fire, it just hit you. I remember it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it caught on fire, and there was a young man who was just ordained from this parish, and he happened to be going down the street. He came in, got the Blessed Sacrament out of the church, and the whole church just went up in flames. And then by 5 o'clock it was over, and then they asked all the parishioners and probably people of whoever's available to come and you had to unscrew all these pews and then take them all over across the street, but life went on. And then they had them all refinished and connected them, because the design of the old church was different than this one.
Interesting. Not only did you move these pews, but after this church was built, you said your first Mass. You celebrated your first Mass in this church.
Yes, I did. So there's a lot of memories here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you get back, and today, young people move all over, but when you grow up and that church is yours, And so it was hard to close these churches, because I just grew up here, and that was a difficult moment.
Yeah. Well, Monsignor, thanks for sharing that moment with us. We appreciate it.
It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And
our next stop, St. John's Anglican Church. This is the oldest church building in Quincy, and has the unfortunate distinction of having the roof burned off of it about 15 years ago, but it's looking good now. Don Ganussi, this is a very historic church, St. John's Anglican. It's the cathedral for the diocese.
Correct.
And it's the oldest church building in Quincy.
That's correct.
And it nearly didn't get to survive, because about 15 years ago there was a massive fire here that took the top right off it, didn't it?
Absolutely. Unbelievable, but we're here today.
You are here today, and I want to walk up a little closer. Let's go, because it's a beautiful sight. The first thing that I notice when I walk up here is that massive organ, the pipes of the organ.
Yes.
The organ wasn't always there, was it?
No. The organ used to be on this right side, the east of the area, but when the fire took place, it broke through from the outside storm, thunder and lightning, and came down here at the beginning of the fire. And it indeed took part of this main altar, which used to be here, burnt part of it.
Well, let's go over there and take a look.
Okay.
Because this is an important story. This was your main altar, and like you said, it was a third or a halfway gone, and you had to figure out a way to reproduce this.
That is correct. And at first we were not aware that it could be reproduced, but then the contractor told us that they had lathes and computers that could redo the side that was burnt.
Wow.
And they did do it, but unfortunately we had already purchased a new organ because the old organ had been destroyed, which used to sit here. So this altar was brought over here, reestablished, and then the work was done. We brought in an artist who redid the paintings exactly as they were done originally by a Bavarian artist who had come to America to do some work like this in some churches on the East Coast. And because a friend knew him here in Quincy, he agreed to come here from Bavaria to do this, and died about 2 months after he finished this.
And he was able to make almost exact copies of the artwork that you had.
Exactly.
And if you look at the woodwork on this left side that was burned, look how intricate that is.
Just
It's
amazing that it could be reproduced.
Absolutely. You're so fortunate.
Clear down to the saints that are carved down below that were destroyed on this side.
Okay, so you've got the original back altar, you've got that replaced. You've got a new organ, a new huge organ where you were able to find one for a church that had closed.
Correct.
You got that now. And through the years, you've always been very fortunate with some benefactors, and they would like this pulpit, for instance.
Beautiful memorials that members of the church. The Diocese of Quincy was created in the 1870s. Quincy was at one time the third largest city in Illinois at that time. And the Diocese of Chicago was too large, so they came along about 1870 and set up a new diocese in Springfield and one in Quincy. And this became the cathedral, and still is the cathedral today.
And some of your congregation would make these memorial gifts as their family members would perish. Now, you also have this distinction of having a couple of Tiffany windows in here, and I stop here because we're looking at the Ascension, and there's a way that they were able to make the light play through this window, wasn't there?
Tiffany was able to, through about 3 different layers of glass, to bring about the looks as though there was light behind it at all times, even on a darker day. Amazing. But that's what made Tiffany so famous. And fortunately, it was not destroyed through the fire.
That's remarkable. You have another Tiffany window, too, that was not destroyed through the fire.
Correct.
And in fact, all your windows are of very fine quality, and you lost very few of them, didn't you?
Fortunately, the ceiling caved in just in time. We were told that likely the windows would have blown out, but didn't, just simply because the pressure, when the ceiling fell in, they were saved.
It relieved the pressure, okay. And this is the last thing we get to take a look at, but as we look straight up, all of this new woodwork, it was all destroyed by the fire, all of this new woodwork it looks original, and it's such great work, and it's just, and it's very sturdy. It's not going anywhere, is it?
No, it's just amazing.
Beautiful work.
We're so thankful that, because the windows, the pictures in the windows, like the early churches, told the Bible stories. They gave you an idea of what took place in the Bible by the pictures in the windows. And that's what these windows are all about.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
And our final stop, the Vermont Street United Methodist Church. Interestingly, this church was also the victim of a natural disaster. In the late 1940s, a tornado destroyed it, and as a result, in the early 1950s, this church was built. Pastor Johansson, we'll start off in the chapel, and we'll get to the grand sanctuary in just a minute. But the windows in this chapel and in the church itself, you like to tell stories with the windows, don't you?
Yeah, that was the reason that windows were created like this, is to tell stories from the Bible, and that's what these windows do, is they tell the story of the Lord's Prayer.
Okay, let's start off for me. How is that the Lord's?
So this is Our Father who art in heaven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And this is hallowed be thy name. And then down here, the ship reminds us of thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Okay.
On earth as it is in heaven.
As it is in heaven, of course, an angel symbolizing heaven.
Right. And then,
a sheaf of wheat.
Right.
Okay.
Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass.
The broken tablets.
Against
okay.
us. Yeah.
Clever.
And lead us not into temptation.
Oh, okay. Lead us not into temptation. Now, what are we looking at here?
There's a snake up at the top of the image of the world, which was, of course, a symbol of sin and evil.
Right, Adam and Eve with the serpent. Okay. Lead us not into temptation.
Deliver us from evil, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. And this is just the lightning bolt and the ship are just images of God and God's power. And so.
And in the main sanctuary, you have a series of windows, and they tell the story of Christ's life and other stories as well.
Right.
And you said something interesting, that stained glass windows were developed originally to tell stories because so many people were illiterate at the time, and they had to see pictures.
So the church did such a service, and has done, I think, my opinion, has done a disservice in the way that we have covered up the outsides of windows these days. And I know it's for preserving our energy
Sa-
and all of that
yeah,
kind of thing,
yeah.
and saving the windows. But people can't really see the windows from the outside anymore, and so
Yeah.
it's hard to see those stories.
Yeah. Well, let's go in the sanctuary, okay? Pastor, when you get into the sanctuary, it's gorgeous because this grand window is surrounded by all these pipes from the organ,
Yeah.
and it's very, very impressive.
It is beautiful.
Tell me about the big window.
This is the Gurmann Memorial window that was given by the Gurmann family in memory of members of their family. And this represents scenes from the life of Christ. The center panels down the middle represent 3 scenes from the life of Christ. At the top is Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law. And then the middle section shows Jesus blessing the children. And then at the bottom, he's giving the Great Commission to go into all the world to baptize people. And then on the 4 corners of the window are figures representing 4 women who were very close to Jesus, very involved in his life and ministry. So on the upper left panel is Mary, Jesus' mother. And then Mary Magdalene is in the upper right panel. And then the lower panels are Mary and Martha of Bethany. And so Mary's on the left and Martha is on the right, which, you know, as I look closer, I see Martha carrying that tray, and that's what she's kind of known for, is serving and taking care of people.
Right.
So, right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And it must be a massive sound when you get all these pipes going at one time.
Oh, it is. It's an amazing thing. Yeah.
You've got your console, organ console up here next to the
Right.
piano,
Yeah.
and I'll bet that's a thrill to play. I'll bet it's a beautiful instrument.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Now, as we walk back, we can see that it's not an old church. It was built in early 1950s, I guess.
Yep.
But it's definitely Gothic with all these archways.
Right, right. And the windows here also remind us of scriptures, and the lower windows remind us of the life of Jesus. And starting with the Annunciation, the lily in the center of the window.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, is a symbol for Mary, of course. And then goes on to the manger.
The birth of Christ.
Right, the birth of Christ. And then the adoration of the Magi, the shepherd's crook, the carpenter shop. There's a little vice grip or something there in that window. Jesus among the teachers in the temple. Yeah, as a boy when he went missing.
And he was
Yeah.
so wise.
Yeah.
Even the elders
Yeah,
were listening to him.
They were amazed
weren't
at
they?
his
Yeah.
teachings, yeah. And then we've got the baptism, which is a font with a dove in it, and then the call of the fishermen, Jesus calling the fishermen to follow him.
Gorgeous. And when you look back then, of course, another series of pipes, organ pipes.
Right.
And a beautiful window at the top.
Yeah, that's called a rose window, and there's nothing particularly biblical about it, but it's just very, very beautiful and catches the light real pretty on Sunday mornings is when I'm usually in here and can see that.
You know, we just left a church that had burned, and in fact, this unfortunate thing happened to this church, this congregation as well.
Yeah, it was a tornado that
tornado.
hit, but yeah, and things like that happen sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Tornado hits, and then they decide, well, we have a tough decision to make. Do we rebuild?
Right.
Or do we move? What do we do?
Yeah.
They built on the same location.
They did.
Didn't they?
Yeah. So,
Well, Pastor, thank you for showing us
you're
around. We
welcome.
really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
And for those of you who would like to see more, remember that Quincy Preserves has their annual altar crawl, and you can see these churches as well as additional ones on that date. With another Illinois Story in Quincy, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.